I'm going to show you how to build and copy any website in Claude Code, even if you are not technical. I built this website that we're looking at on the screen in 15 minutes, and by the end of this video, you'll be able to do the same. Let's take a look at the website I asked Claude Code to copy. So on the right, we have the original website, which is superhigh.com. And to the left, we have the website that Claude Code built just using screenshots. If we look at the original compared to the one that Claude Code built, there are some differences. But overall, if we think about a prototype that took just 15 minutes, honestly, we're pretty much 85 to 90% of the way there. Now, we're going to be using Claude Code. So if you haven't set it up before, I'm going to link a video down below in the description. Also, I'm going to link it up here for a setup guide that I created for you to get started. Once you have Claude Code set up, then come back to this video and then you'll be able to follow along. But guys, think about how crazy this is. I can't code. I cannot write a single line of HTML code or CSS, but just using some screenshots in Claude Code, I was able to create this website that is honestly so close to the original. And if I think about what this unlocks for the average person, it's something that is honestly just so exciting for me. Here's what's interesting. To the left, we have the website that Claude Code created, and to the right, we have the original, but I'm gonna show you guys a side-by-side comparison that actually is gonna even be more interesting than this. Here is that new side-by-side comparison. On the left, we have the original website that Claude Code created, so this stayed the same. But to the right, this view is a little bit different. It looks like a new website, but it's honestly not that great. What are the differences between these two? Well, here's what's interesting. Both were created by Claude Code, but the one on the left was created using a more efficient method, and the one on the right was not using an efficient method. And what do I mean by efficient method? Well, we're going to walk through that, but essentially it has to do with the context or the claude.md file that you start with. And the reason that I'm even talking about this and not jumping straight into the walkthrough of how to build a website with Claude Code is because I want you guys to understand that there is a best practice when it comes to how to get the most out of these chatbots, whether it's Claude Code or ChatGPT's Codex. And if you build the fundamentals and the foundation of using these models well, then you're going to be able to get a better output from that. And I can't think about a better way to describe that than looking at the website on the left versus the website on the right. So what are some differences between these two websites? Well, first off, let's look at the logo in the top left. This side looks way better. Let's look at something else, which is interesting. It has to do with the technical specifications of the way that the website was built. So look what happens to the website on the right when I try and resize it. It gets all messed up. But let's look what happens when I try to do that to the website on the left. The spacing stays so much more consistent, and the technical way that the website was built in the backend was so much more efficient. Keep in mind that both websites were created using the same exact prompt and the same exact reference image. So why did they come out differently? Let's talk about it. Fundamentally, it has to do with one thing, which is the claude.md file. So in VS Code, we have two windows open. To the left, we have a window with the claude.md file, and to the right, we have a window without one. This window to the right is what I used to build the website that honestly didn't come out that great. And this window to the left is the one that I used to build the website that came out honestly pretty good. And the reason for that is because this claude.md file walks through best practices on how to build a website from a screenshot. It walks through best practices on building a website on the front end and back end. It walks through instructions on how it can check its own work without me having to do it manually. And all of these instructions lend itself to creating a really good output starting from just one prompt. If we just did a comparison where I just asked a single prompt and used the same reference image and tried it for both of these different windows, then the output that I would get is exactly what we were just looking at, where we have one website that looks pretty good. And honestly, the scaling is great. The technical specifications in the back end were amazing. But then to the right, you see, honestly, it was kind of flat and dull. And even when we tried to resize the screen, things were getting messed up. The reason that I am covering this before we even go through the walkthrough with Claude Code is because understanding this fundamental concept is going to help y'all honestly so much get more out of using these chatbots like Claude Code. What the heck is a Claude.md file and why do I care? It's a way for Claude Code to understand all of the important details and procedural parts that you want it to go through. Let's look at kind of this visualized in a different way. And honestly, this is kind of interesting to me. Let's think about what the cost of not using a Claude.md file is. Imagine we have a dartboard, and every time that you threw a dart, you landed anywhere between a 10-inch radius on the board. Well, if you think about it, if you're trying to hit bullseye, that's not very accurate, right? And if we take this ball, for example, on the board, okay, we start here, and then through some additional prompting, eventually we can get here. And then maybe, through some more prompting, we can get here. And after a lot of back and forth, we can get as close to the bullseye as possible. But what if there was a world where rather than starting from a 10-inch radius from outside of the bullseye, we can start as close to the bullseye as possible? Well, guess what? That is exactly what the Claude.md file helps you with, which is if you start with the time that it takes to actually build out that Claude.md file, then starting from your first prompt, you are gonna at least land within a 3-inch radius of the bullseye so that any prompting that you do after the first is gonna honestly take so much less time to get you to the result that you want. To summarize, the Claude.md file basically gets you as close to the bullseye as possible, and then from there you can tweak it to actually get there. But then without a Claude.md file, your output is so far off the mark that it's going to take forever for you to get the output that you actually want. To really drive home this point, there's a couple of things I want to show you guys. And I love the way that this has been explained to me, which is you cannot eliminate the work required to get a perfect output. You can only choose when to perform it. Crafting the file is simply moving the friction to where it's the lowest. So what do I mean by that, Timothy? So let's look at an example. Let's imagine scenario A, where we start with no Claude.md file. So we just jump into prompting Claude Code. Well, in the beginning, honestly, it's going to be super smooth because we don't have any work to do. But then once we actually have to start correcting the output that Claude Code gave us, it's going to be hell. And this is such a great way to visualize it, just thinking about this backend trap that gets created. But then what does it look like if we start with a Claude.md file? Well, that's what's great, which is at first it's going to be some work. But then if we think about what it's going to look like in the backend of our entire project flow, it's going to go so much more smooth, guys. And this is fundamentally so important. To summarize this all with a single point, and then I promise you guys, we're going to dive into actually building the website. All I want you guys to think about is net efficiency is the only metric that matters when it comes to using AI like Claude Code. Yes, if you don't use a Claude.md file, maybe in the beginning you'll save time, but if you zoom out and look at the bigger picture, then ultimately you're going to waste so much time in the correction phase of trying to fix the outputs that it's not even going to be worth it. But then if you look at the scenario with a file, then yes, setup is going to take more time and it's going to take a little bit more work. But the time that you spend in correction is going to be so much smaller. Guys, please just front load your work by building the context or the Claude.md file. And I promise you, things are going to go so much smoother with anything that you work on, not even the project that we're talking about today, but anything that you work on with AI and using these LLMs. I hope this made sense because this is honestly such an underrated and understated point in the entire conversation and dialogue about using AI right now. Now, let's actually dive into building the website because I know that's what everyone is excited to do. To start, open a completely fresh window in VS Code. From here, I'm just going to hit open and let's just do a new folder. I'm going to do website build YouTube video and open. Now we have a completely fresh file in VS Code to work from, or a fresh folder, I should say. And once we have this open, I'm just going to hit the Claude Code icon here to get the chat window up. I'm going to close this out. Step number 1 will be for us to add the Claude.md file like I was just talking about with you guys. To do that, I have created a resource document, which I will link down below in the description, and you can just copy and paste from that document. If you navigate to that document, then this is exactly what you should see. If you scroll down, we have the Claude.md file. I am just going to copy this. Go back to VS Code. Once I'm here, I'm just going to hit this file icon here, new file, and name it Claude.md. A window like this should open up for you guys. I'm just going to hit paste, and now we have our Claude.md file. I'm going to hit save. To confirm that your Claude instance now has access to that Claude.md file, then we can even just ask it. Can you please summarize what is in the Claude.md file for me? Let's see what it says. And then after, okay, awesome. So it looks like it responded. It responded with a summary of everything that is in the Claude.md file, like we talked about. And so here, like I was mentioning to you guys, everything in that file is basically instructions on how to make a good website on the front end and back end, how to check or how Claude can check its own work so I don't manually have to. And reasonably, your next question might be, that's awesome, Timothy, but how did you create that Claude.md file? And if we take a look at it, we can walk through it together. Guys, all I did was I used research mode in Claude and asked it, can you please help me create a Claude.md file? I'm trying to recreate websites using screenshots, and I would like Claude to follow best practices and instructions on not only how to build it, but also how to check its own work. And from that prompt, Claude spent maybe 5 or 10 minutes researching, and then it gave me this Claude.md file. For you, not only for this project, but that can be how you think about how to create your own MD files in the future for any projects that you're working on. And what's neat is that the more that you work from a single Claude.md file for a specific project, that markdown or MD file is going to continually get better, because every time you go through it, you're going to find things that, hey, actually, can you tweak this a little bit? Or can you remove this? And every one of those iterations is going to make an amazing Claude.md file that is kind of the process of how I think about using this. Now, here is the part I really wanted to show you guys. We don't need to go through the technical details of what Claude is doing in terms of the actual website code and design, because that honestly would go over my head because I'm not technical. The part that is really interesting is what I have built in here so that Claude can check its own work. And this is really, really neat. You'll find it under this section called the loop. And here, Claude is given the instructions to repeat this loop until there's at least a 95% plus visual match. So what Claude does is that it builds the page from the reference image that we're going to give it, and then screenshot the built file using playwright at the same viewport at the reference. You don't need to know what playwright or viewport means. Just understand that Claude screenshots it, and then it compares the screenshot against the reference image side by side and evaluating every dimension and seeing what is different between the two. And when it finds anything different between the two, it fixes all findings in one pass. And then it screenshots again immediately and compares it again. It repeats those steps in a loop, and that's why this is called the loop. Now, this piece here, about 95% plus match, and we can even use the example that we looked at earlier in the video of the original super high website and the one that Claude Code built side by side. They still weren't perfectly close. And that's because there's a lot of functionality that Claude didn't build into the website in terms of making things interactive or making things like actually move when you hover over them. That's because for this tutorial, we're just looking at the actual like a static design. And then in future videos, we'll kind of talk about how to add those more interesting components like, hey, Claude, when I hover over this button, can you make it shine? And so for this, from Claude's perspective, the 95% match strictly just has to do with the static view that it has. Now, this logic of a loop is really interesting because I encourage you guys to add this instruction for any Claude.md file that you're crafting in the future. Because if you can have a process where the AI checks against itself, then that will really help remove some of the manual work that you will have to do. We've talked about the Claude.md file. We've talked about how to build it, and we've talked about why it's important. So now let's actually dive into the nitty-gritty details of recreating the super high website. I'm going to X out of this tab here and then open a new Claude Code instance. Let's navigate back to the setup guide. And in this setup guide, let's head on over to superhigh.com. And if we notice in the setup guide, step 1 is take a full size screenshot. Now, what do I mean by take a full size screenshot? If you look at how long this page is, you might ask yourself the question, is there a way that I can take a screenshot of this entire page without having to break it up one by one? And so what I mean by that is, let's say I take a screenshot of this, and then I go down and take a screenshot of this, and I repeat that for the rest of the page. I don't know about you guys, but that is pretty annoying. There's actually a way that you can take a screenshot of this entire page without having to do that. Let's walk through how to do that. If we look at step 1 of the setup guide, all you need to do is follow these instructions. So if you're on Mac, you can just hit Command-Option-I on the website, or if you're on Windows, just hit Control-Shift-I. Or if you just don't want to hit any hotkeys at all, you can just right-click the page and click Inspect. Now, once you hit Inspect, then if we go back to the setup guide, looks like we need to open the command palette. So on Mac, to do that, I'm just going to hit Command-Shift-P. And once I have this window open, then all you need to do is search for screenshot. and you should get some options that pop up. And I'm going to hit capture full size screenshot. It's going to take a second to load, and then it looks like it finished. Now we have a full size screenshot of the entire website. Doesn't this look so much more clean? And taking single screenshots piece by piece, honestly, is such a pain in the butt, at least for me. Once we have that screenshot, we actually need to resize it because it is too big for the Claude Code API. The limit, I believe, is about 5 megabytes. In the setup guide, there's a few ways that we can do this. And honestly, resizing something, people have many different paths that they take. So sometimes people like to use Canva if they have a Canva account. Other times, if you don't have a Canva account, you can use this website, iloveimg.com. So I'm just going to use this for the video because I know not everyone has an account in Canva. Once you are on iloveimg, then just hit resize image here. And then select the full size screenshot that we downloaded. Now, there are two important things to understand when resizing an image that we're going to use for Claude Code. A, the image cannot be bigger or quote unquote longer than 8,000 pixels. So if we look here, the width is okay because it's 3,800, but the length is definitely way too long. It's almost double the amount that is allowed. And then B, the file cannot be bigger than 5 megabytes. So to resize it, we are going to use those 2 points to guide us on how much to do. If we look at the by percentage option, it looks like if we make it 50% smaller, then the ratio will then be 1920 by 8200, which is still too much. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to take this figure 1920 and just do 7900. So let's do width 1920 and then height, let's do 7,800. And I'm going to see if that works. I might need to uncheck this box. Let's try. Perfect. So it looks like it fixed the ratio itself, which is perfect. And hit download resized images. And if we take a look, perfect. It's under 5 megabytes and it's within the allowed limit for being under 8,000 pixels. Once you have that resized image, let's head back on over to Claude Code and attach that image. I'm gonna hit this backslash, hit attach file, and make sure you're attaching the resized one. Once you have that attached, we just have one more quick step, which is head back on over to the SuperHigh website. And if you still have this window open, then I want you to find body style. So I have it right here, and right click and hover over copy and hit copy styles. Head back on over to VS Code and paste. And let's add a prompt. Please recreate the website in the reference image and use the body style code provided as additional context. I'm gonna edit our permissions to just bypass our permissions and hit enter. So let's see what happens. Now, for this body style code, this is basically some of the specifics on the specific colors that were used and some of the design that Claude Code can reference when recreating the website using the reference image. And so this basically, along with the screenshot, really helps guide it along to build a really good recreation or recreation, I should say. Now that we have added that prompt, Claude is going to go through an entire thinking process to figure out how best to approach this. And as always, I don't know about you guys, but I kind of like looking and opening through the thinking section. It's interesting because this is just kind of how a human being would think. And it's cool to see Claude go through some of those same thought processes that you or I would. I think is honestly really cool. Let's kind of take a step back while Claude is working to think about what we've done. We opened a completely fresh window in VS Code and we uploaded our custom Claude.md file, which now we know, hopefully, are our custom set of instructions or procedures that we want Claude to follow. And we found a website that we wanted to recreate. And using the console, we were able to take a full size screenshot of that website, attach it, and then we are also able to copy and paste kind of the body style of the website to give Claude even more context on making a really good copy. And now we just have to see what the final result looks like. So I will speed up the video and join you guys once this is finished so that we can all look at it together. And I'm kind of excited. That ran for about 15 minutes. So let's take a look at the actual website. To do that, all you need to do is click this button here, index.html. And if you do not have this option in the top right-hand corner for showing preview, this is actually a very handy extension in VS Code I found out about recently, where you can preview anything that you build within VS Code itself. Before, without having this extension, you would not be able to do that, and it was kind of a pain to view anything. This extension is called Live Preview, and it is by Microsoft, so it is completely safe. Find this in your extension panel and install it. And once you install it, then what you'll be able to do is basically look at live previews within VS Code. So I'm going to head back on over to here and hit this button here with the magnifying glass. Now we have a live preview in VS Code. And to clean this up a bit, let's just look at it in browser. And so to do that, I'm going to hit this icon here and hit open in browser. And look, this is the finished website. And that literally took 15 minutes, guys. How crazy is that? There's a few really cool things that I want to walk you guys through, which is the process that Claude took. So let's actually look at the reasoning that it went through. Let me clean up our view a little bit. Okay, perfect. So guys, look how interesting this is. You remember how I talked about that self loop that was implemented in the Claude.md file for the instructions that Claude was going to follow? Well, let's take a look at that in actual practice. Round one findings. Hero shapes need adjustment. Course cards need small lesson count badges. Student work section, the blue dot position needs tweaking. Okay, so now Claude is going to fix that in round two. How crazy is that? And then if we scroll down to round two, let's take a look. Round two, it goes over that process again. It looks like removing the announcement bar, which I think it should have kept. Here, logo sections barely visible, need more visual weight. And it just goes through this self-correcting process to get better and better. And then if we look in round three, then it gives an assessment of all of the corrections that it did. And it's like, okay, I feel like now we're at a pretty good visual match. And that is just insane to me, guys. Like, and I'm not trying to be over dramatic. And I know there's all these headlines about crazy things that AI does. But to me, this was one of the moments where I was like, wow, like it is literally self-correcting itself without any manual input from me. To make additional changes to this website, all you need to do is just look at what you want to fix or change or tweak in the website, and you just tell that to Claude Code, and it makes those changes for you. This was a video on how to create an initial prototype of a website, especially when you have inspiration from another one that's not that you exactly want to copy, but that you want to influence the design of yours with. And creating this kind of prototype is only the first step. There's also the entire process of, hey, Timothy, how can I actually deploy this website? And that is a whole nother process and video. But if you have stayed up until this point, I just want to say thank you so much for watching. I'm Timothy. I work in advanced analytics at a Fortune 500 company, and we use AI every day. And I just wanted to make YouTube videos to show people the cool things that you can do with AI. And I make videos all about Claude. So thank you so much for watching.